The Harlem Renaissance is one of the most iconic cultural periods in African American history. Throughout the decade of the 1920s, black writing, art, and music flourished, ushering in a cultural revolution that rocked the United States.
One of the most important factors that accounted for the rise of what we know of as the Harlem Renaissance is the migration of black peoples from the South to urban centers like Harlem.
The Jim Crow era begins after Reconstruction, and every Southern African American had to think about, what should we do? Should we go or should we stay? For many of these people, it was a matter of life and death, literally.
Sometimes in the most repressive times, we create the most extraordinary art.
Amidst the fervor of the Great Migration, bold, exciting forms of black music evolved, along with venues to listen and dance to this music. Blues and jazz clubs became a central part of life in Harlem, where artists such as Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, Bessie and Mamie Smith rose to prominence.
Then began to cry. He went away and never even said goodbye.
The era also saw the burgeoning of literary work by and about African Americans, which the writer Alain Locke compiled into an anthology. He called it The New Negro, and its name came to define a movement.
The Harlem Renaissance is a facet of a larger movement that we think of as the New Negro movement, where you have a new generation of black people, by this point, 2 generations out of slavery, using the arts as a way to help people gain broader civil and political rights.
Some of the framers of what became the Renaissance make the argument that the artistic worth of a people has to be proven by the worth of the art and literature they produced, especially for people that historically, over centuries, have been defined as without culture, without history, and without any record of achievement.
The Harlem Renaissance was the flowering of creativity that had been suppressed for centuries. People that had the sense that things were opening up. And finally, we can be the people that we imagine ourselves to be.
Today we'll be looking at Incognegro and discussing the theme of recognition. After the ending of slavery in the United States of America, many states still remained indifferent about the black population. It was still dangerous for black people, as many did not believe they should have rights and still saw them as property rather than humans. There were, and still are, what are called sundown towns, and some states, often in the South, that are labeled as racist. There were, however, progressive states such as New York and communities such as Harlem that provided a safe haven and a space to evolve and adapt for black people. While reports came in of lynching in other states and rumors of injustice, as there were many unreported crimes that targeted black people, Harlem was producing a new era of creativity from the black population as it created a new history for them. The theme of recognition, therefore, is not isolated to identification of self and race, to say, I identify as black or white, but also of talents and prosperity.
It is important to note the period in history that Incognegro by Matt Johnson targets. For many, being recognized simply meant being treated like a human being, to be seen as holding power and control over self. Zane Pinchback, the main character, was granted this power due to him favoring his Caucasian father. However, that too comes with its traumas, as we get the image that his and his brother's conception was not by the consent of their mother. Zane and Alonzo Pinchback are products of rape, yet another injustice by a white man unto the black race. We all see and recognize them for what they represent and endured. As two sides of a coin, Alonzo favored his mother and was subject to the abuse faced by the black man, while Zane was granted automatic privilege in society as he passed as a white man. Zane, however, decided to identify with the black community by adding to their economy, not hiding his true background completely from them, as his boss knew who he was, and using his passing as a way to join the race war in favor of the black people. In a way, it was this recognition that Carl, Zane's friend, sought, as he may have felt pressured by Zane's success. His girlfriend wanted him to be something more, since he did not have a steady job, and a person such as Zane as a friend may cause one to question their purpose in life, as Zane intended to play an active part in the renaissance of the American black population. As a black man passing as white, Carl too should be able to achieve more than the average person. Zane as Incognegro was doing the black community a great service, while Carl gambled and was only successful by keeping up appearances. Carl wanted to use his whiteness for the black community as well, and thought that if Zane could do it, then he could too, as they were basically the same, passing. He did, in the end, do good by staying loyal to Zane and protecting him, even if that meant death. Carl, in the moment, faced with a Ku Klux Klan member, may have realized how big of an impact Zane had on the disruption of the white community and their treatment towards black people. He recognized Zane's purpose in the Renaissance and may have also seen that he could not fill his shoes, and no matter what, Zane must succeed in his task. We see Zane going through different types of recognition throughout the novel. His power as Incognegro was shown through his boss's adamancy to keep him working, as many readers felt empowered by the work that was being done. Incognegro gave voice to the voiceless, as he documented the death of blacks that would otherwise be erased from the memories of the living as just another nigger. News of lynchings weren't published as much because the white population did not care to think of them as humans and would do many things to dehumanize them more to prove they are not so. The absence of recognition as a black man also granted him the privilege to be closer to the stories and people. However, there were some, like Ryder, who he met in Mississippi, who he could not hide his blackness from. His actions told who he really was, and instead of being like some white people who see what they want to see, as a black man, Ryder could see beyond Zane's skin and note how his features favored his brothers. Looks that could kill. It's what being black was described as in the review section of this issue of Incognegro. Recognition can also be a bad thing, as we see with the member of the Ku Klux Klan. He ended up dying like many blacks he helped to lynch, which in itself is ironic. In his last moments, he was a black man, subject to the disgust, racism, and brutality he himself helped to conduct against the black race. We see how him being recognized in Mississippi as a KKK member gave him power and a voice in that community, but as soon as he was labeled as a passing black man, let alone the Incognegro, his voice held no power, and no denial could be proof that he was being wrongly accused. When he was white, his words were poison, as the other white people clung to them. But as a black man, he is given no benefit of the doubt, nor second chances, especially if he was being accused of being a white passing spy. Throughout this graphic novel, the theme of recognition functions in many ways. We get to see how being born in certain circumstances could create different paths for you. It is like a tree with many branches leading you into different directions. We need to recognize the power we hold and how we each have a part to play in the story of life. Today, we still struggle with race and acceptance, but first we must look into ourselves, confront our fears and traumas, and rise against it, doing ourselves and our community service as we recognize our true potentials and limitations. It started with places like Harlem and people like Zane, and it will continue with us as we acknowledge and treat ourselves as human beings.
I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle.